Welcome, Fright Night Vault listeners. Some places keep their own weather. Even when the thaw comes, a thin chill clings to the earth like a secret. Out past the hedgerows and the rutted road, there stood a small farm hemmed in by dark trees and a wind that loved to listen at doors. In that last week before the silence, the farm began to speak, softly at first, until the house itself seemed to breathe. 6 days before the end, the old man followed a line of marks across the yard at 7:20 in the morning, boots crunching over pale snow. Footprints, not many, just one set, broad, deep, moving from the tree line to the back of the barn. He traced them all the way to the door and waited for the returning path that ought to have led back to the woods. None existed. The snow behind the barn lay smooth as folded linen. He checked the loft ladder, he checked the empty stalls. He told no story about ghosts or men, only said the weather was playing tricks and carried a pitchfork to the pen as if iron could settle the mind. 5 days before, the house mislaid little things and found them again in places no one remembered using. The mother's ring of keys was gone from its hook at 8:43 in the evening. By morning, it winked from under a rag of hay as if it had slept there all night. A newspaper none of them bought appeared neatly folded on the kitchen table. The boy swore he heard someone on the attic boards just past 1:19 in the morning, a slow crossing from one end to the other, like a person learning which plank would complain and which would keep a secret. The stove's last ember died. In the dark, the house held its breath. 4 days before, the animals grew alert at nothing. Cows raised their heads all at once, eyes turned to the loft. The dog, never quick to bark, stared at the ladder and made a small sound he did not usually make. That night, the old man took a lantern and searched the attic, sweeping light along roof timbers, finding only dust and the dry whisper of straw. He returned to bed just past 11:17 and lay awake listening for the sound a lantern makes after it dies, imagining it, hearing it, unsure which was true. 3 days before, the daughter was seen in town with the little one in her arms, cheeks bright from the air, shopping for things the farm could not provide. She spoke of nothing unusual. Coins changed hands. On the road home, she looked once over her shoulder without knowing why. The tree line stood in its old place, quiet as a held breath. That evening, at 9:54, a door that had been shut was found slightly open. The old man blamed the latch. The latch did not answer. 2 days before, the mother paused in the hall outside the bedrooms just after 1:26 in the morning and pressed her palm to the wood of the attic door. Breath came from the other side, there and gone, a presence the wood carried to her hand. She woke her husband. They walked the house together, lamps held low, the flames' small circle never quite reaching the corners. At the kitchen table lay the newspaper again, folded with a neatness that did not belong to anyone in that house. The old man took it up and put it by the stove without comment. The boy's school satchel rested by the door, ready for morning, as if routine could hold back a door from opening. 1 day before, a new face arrived at the farm near first light. A woman with a small case, come for work and a bed. She was shown the kitchen, the stove, the pump, the way the house preferred to be kept. She nodded, took the little one's hand, learned the weight of the room she'd sleep in. Afternoon slanted toward evening. The dog ranged and returned, nose dusted with straw. Keys were checked, latch tested, curtains drawn. At 9:12, the old man stepped onto the stoop with a lantern to look toward the barn. The lantern wrote a circle on the yard and nothing else. He went back inside, said nothing more than good night. The day itself, the day that opened like any other, began with chores. Bread was cut, milk carried. The little one laughed at something small and unimportant and vital. A neighbor passed on the road and lifted a hand. Time behaved. The sky was a hard coin falling into evening. At 6:16, the cows lowed as if reminding the family of themselves. Someone went out toward the barn. The old man first, perhaps, or the mother. voice carried in the wind, or the daughter with the child already set safe in the kitchen. Each step toward the barn pulled another behind it. Calls, questions, the ordinary pull of work. The barn mouth stood open, shadowed and waiting. Beyond it, hay and beam, the soft sounds of animals shifting. No one heard the first blow from far away, and those close enough did not have time to finish a cry. Inside that dim, the order of a farm came apart. The old man fell first, struck, then struck again, as if struck from the air. The mother followed, no chance to name what had entered the room. The daughter did not reach the doorway. The boy did not make it back to the house to warn anyone. In the house itself, the new woman in her small room heard a change in the air that houses make when something is wrong, a pressure, a hum, and before she could rise, a shape already stood in her doorway. The bed bore witness. The walls held the sound. In the next room, the smallest child lay with hands folded by someone else's will. The house, as houses do, absorbed everything and said nothing. What came next was stranger than the killing. The hand that killed remained. The animals were fed. The cow's flank was wiped where a careless blow had left a mark. Grain was measured and poured. The kitchen stove was lit. Bread cut from their loaf, meat taken from their shelf. Smoke rose from the chimney, telling the world nothing had changed. Beds were warmed by a body that did not belong to the house. A lamp burned. Fabric was moved. Curtains straightened. The dog was tied and retied and quieted. The days turned. The yard saw no footprints leaving, because there were none. Neighbors noticed what neighbors notice when a routine breaks in the middle. The boy did not appear at school. Milk deliveries stopped. Mail sat too long. The farm's dog barked at odd hours, muffled, then not at all. A woman from the village knocked on the door and received no answer. She looked at the smoke and told herself all was well. Two men came the next day and peered into windows and told each other they were worrying over nothing. Another day, and the worry no longer listened to its own excuses. A small group approached the barn at 4:17 in the afternoon. The door lifted. The smell of animal and hay and something iron-flecked met them at once. They found the barn first. Hay forked aside revealed forms where forms should not have been. A coat thrown over what should not be seen. Breath hitched. A hand went to a mouth. Another hand took that hand down. They called out names that would not answer. They went into the house with steps that couldn't make up their minds whether to hurry or not. In the small room off the kitchen lay the new woman who had only just arrived. In the bedroom, the smallest one. A shutter lifted and fell and lifted again in a wind that had gone mean with knowledge. The men went back to the yard and stood as if the world needed them to be taller. Word ran to the authorities. Men with notebooks and gloves. Questions asked and not answered by wood and straw. A doctor arrived and bent over each form, and the barn became a room where sentences no family should hear were said anyway. Tools were examined. A missing implement suggested itself by its mark, a short-handled blade with a heavy, blunt force married to a sharp edge, the sort of tool meant for farming that knows how to speak another language when commanded. There were signs of order imposed after the fact, coverings drawn over faces, objects arranged. The house told smaller stories too, someone taking food, someone making use of the stove, someone staying through at least part of the days that followed. They searched for footsteps leaving, the kind the old man had looked for a week earlier. None led away in any definite path. The yard bore the confusion of many arrivals after the fact. The earlier days had smoothed their secrets. Doors showed marks of being opened not by keys but by purpose. A key known to hang in a particular place could not be found. Questions went to neighbors. Had anyone seen a stranger in the lane? Had a vagrant passed? Had a former hand returned? Had anyone heard a quarrel? Answers came shaped like the people who gave them. Cautious, certain, uncertain, sure they remembered a face, sure they did not. Nights in the village changed. Children were gathered into tighter rooms. Men sat with lamps lit longer. The farm was attended by those who came to tend to what remained. Animals were removed. Bread was no longer cut in that kitchen. The house stood with curtains parted and then drawn, and then parted again, as if the building itself could not decide whether to acknowledge the road. The investigation widened and circled and widened again. A man was questioned, and then another. The world made theories as if the making could build a bridge out of the gap the facts had left. Motives were assembled from rumor and from history and from the easy reach of human suspicion. And yet, the true shape of the hand that had come into that yard remained in the dark, the same dark from which the first footprints had arrived. Dark and practical as a coat pulled on before work. Time moved without asking permission. The farm was cleared. The ground was worked by other hands. The house aged and finally was pulled down. What had happened inside it did not leave with the timbers. It stayed in the air like a scent only some noses can catch. People driving that road years later slowed without knowing why. On very still nights, those who lived within sight of the old place said the dog sounded again, a bark that had learned to be careful. The story of that week remains in the small particulars more than in the grand declarations, keys that hid themselves, a newspaper folding itself like a letter, a single line of prints that came and never went. A house that drew every member of a family toward a single door at almost the same hour. A stranger who ate their bread and warmed themselves by their fire after the work was done, and then left without telling the snow where he had gone. Listen to the quiet between the notes, and you can still hear how the days arranged themselves. 6 before, 5 before, 3, 2, 1, each closing softer, each closing nearer. The last night ending at a time no one spoke aloud, the stove cooling, the lamps going out, a room that did not empty. What remains is a question with edges. Who comes to a place like that without needing a map? Who knows which door will give and which will hold? Who stays to feed the animals? Answers were tried on like coats and found not to fit. The road kept its own counsel. The trees that watched kept theirs. The earth, which remembers so well, kept the rest. The story you just heard is no invention. You can look it up. The incident is called the Hinterkaifeck murders. Keep your doors honest and your fields in sight. Not every footprint that arrives will show you how it leaves. If you made it this far, you're one of us. Subscribe so you don't miss what crawls out next. If you carry a true horror of your own, leave it for the vault below. The next story could be yours. See you on the next one.